Another game that KU probably should have won, could have won, and did not, as they'll fall short of bowl eligibility for the second straight year. Just disgusting result once again for KU football.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. And on today's episode, we are recapping KU's loss to Utah as another game that KU probably very easily could have won. In fact, I would argue they should have won this game. So we're going to get into what happened in the game. And we're not going to spend, normally we get to our game awards and moments of the game. And, you know, I don't really want to get to those, to be completely honest. We're just going to look ahead to, after we recap the game, we're going to look ahead to some of the big offseason decisions, what the roster could look like for next year, and what they have to do in the transfer portal for now, what becomes extremely important 2026, right? Just as this was an extremely important game that they could not find a way to win. Another game that Kansas, leads at the end of the third quarter, cannot hold on. They make too many mistakes. And whether it's a player, whether it's a coach, whether it's whatever, just keeps happening. Keeps happening to KU. Keeps happening, man. They can't stop it. It is brutal. Okay, so let's just start here. Jalon Daniels was really bad. Jalon Daniels was very, very, very bad for KU today. 10 of 25 heading into the last drive of the game for 187 yards. And if we go to, I would love to see the stats. I think the stats before the previous drive, which he did do a good job leading that drive to make it 24-21. The problem is all the drives that KU got stopped in the red zone. You think of the first drive of the game, KU gets to the Utah 25, throws an interception. Would have been nice to have at least a field goal there. KU misses I forget what it was, 30 whatever yard field goal after they make it, they get the penalty, they back up 5 yards, just, of course, classic Kansas things, and then misses the next field goal after that. You have the two other interceptions in the red zone. One that looked like he was trying to throw it away, didn't get it far enough. I don't know. It legitimately looked like a play that you would try to make to throw an interception if you were like betting against your own team. And then the pick six that basically ends it for KU, a chance where you can tie with a field goal or take the lead with a touchdown, and instead you throw a pick six, and now it's basically game over for Kansas. They did have another shot because of the touchdown, and then the defense couldn't get off the field, but that's not new for KU either. Like, they've had so much. I swear, Kansas could be pitching a shutout and be playing the best defensive game of all time, but if the other team has the ball with under 4 minutes to go, that other team is going to do exactly what they're trying to accomplish in that situation. And I feel like this just kind of caps off a moment or a career for Jalon Daniels where, there were a lot of good moments in Jalon Daniels' career. There were a lot of good statistical outputs, but it's just going to feel like a little bit of empty calories in terms of not having that signature moment, so to speak, the one that Jason Bean got by beating Oklahoma, the one that Jason Bean got by winning the bowl game. And Jalon isn't really going to have that moment. And it's not just that he's not going to have that moment. It's that in a lot of these moments, he kind of shrunk under the pressure. The fumble against Kansas State that allows them to kick the game-winning field goal, right? The struggles in some of the close games last year that you end up one win short of bowl eligibility at the end because of the bad start to the season. Kind of finishing this season on a low note and performing very poorly this season, right? It just kind of capped a career that's very complicated to talk about. And while I do kind of feel bad talking about it in this light from a standpoint of, hey, this is his last game, this is senior day, like clearly this game meant a lot to him. It's not that it wasn't good enough. Like, I feel like when you say it just wasn't good enough, sometimes that can just be like portrayed as you tried really hard, but the other team was more talented. And that's not what this felt like. This just felt like, very, very poor execution. And as much as we've discussed like the KU game management decisions or Kansas kind of turtling late in some games, or the defense's inability to kind of get that final stop, which again happened in this one, but you should have never even been in that situation where you're down 3, where you needed that stop. If we're being completely honest, you should have been up double digits by the time Utah got the ball with under 4 minutes to go. But Jalon's as much fault, like as much as we do blame the coaches and stuff, and there are some of those things here. And again, we have blamed the defense for, not making that last stop. We have blamed the coaches for game management. Jalon is as at fault for them not making back-to-back bowl games as anybody. It's true, right? Like you think of the struggles in the Illinois game, you think of the struggles in the UNLV game, you think of the struggles this year in the K-State game, you think of the fumble against K-State last year. There were a lot of opportunities last year to be bowl eligible, and it didn't happen. And you look at the Arizona game this year where that's not just Jalon, but the offense sputtered in the second half. I'm not putting it all on him. I'm just saying he is far from being without blame, so to speak. Now, there is also culpability on the coaches in this game, right? Which, most of the time, I think for Kansas has shown kind of in a game management perspective where KU has struggled with game management decisions. Maybe a few things you could point to here, but I actually thought the game management was okay here. Like I applaud Lance Leipold for, they had that one 4-7, and even ESPN Analytics was saying punt it, which the ESPN Analytics like always says go for it, and they ended up going for it and not getting it. Maybe you could argue that, okay, should they have ran the ball on third down? But the guy was open on 3rd and 7. Jalon just missed the pass. So it was just poor execution. It was the right call. It was just poor execution. I actually was okay with the game management in this game for KU. But I guess the coaching issue, so to speak, in this one would be more of the play calling. And I guess defensively, like the play calling was okay. I know you give up, 31 points or whatever, but it's not a game where the defense played poorly. Like the defense played well enough for you to win the game. You should have scored, if you get, let's say you even get a field goal on the first drive of the game. Let's say you make the second field goal you take. Okay, now you're at 27 points. Let's say you get a touchdown on one of the 2 other interceptions and even throw an interception on the other one. Then it's 34-31. You win the game, right? And that's assuming you get field goals on a couple of those drives. So it almost felt like, from a play calling perspective offensively, it felt like they were at certain point, at least on the first drive, maybe the early portion of the game, they were trying to make Jalon Daniels senior day happen. They were trying to make Jalon Daniels final game, hey, we're going to put up big stats, send you off with a big game, happen. And that was never going to be the way KU won this game. The way KU won this game, or would be running the football down their throat. And in fact, Kansas did run the football down Utah's throat. But it still didn't matter because they passed too often in key moments, and then Jalon turned it over in too many of those key moments. And it's almost like it almost felt like this season that KU was on a diet and they were in an ice cream shop. And what do I mean by that? It felt like there were moments this season, whether, pick a game, where KU was running the ball well, but they wouldn't stay committed to it. It was like, hey, we're on a diet. We need to run the football. We need to eat healthy. We need to eat our vegetables and eat our salads. And it's like, okay, we're going to eat our salad on Monday. We had some extra vegetables on Tuesday. I think it's a Wednesday, and, you go out to lunch and you see the special is the prime rib special or something like that. And it's like, well, it's on sale. I guess my diet can take a break. And that's how it kind of felt like with the KU offense sometimes this year, that it was like, I don't know, like, we'll throw the ball. Okay, we ran the ball a couple times successfully. Like first drive of the game, KU throws the ball 6 times. They ran the ball twice on the first drive successfully. I think it was like 2 runs for like 20 yards. And they kept throwing the ball. And it's just like those moments where it's like, it felt like KU kept running the ball to try to set up the pass instead of just being like, hey, sometimes let's just run the ball to run the ball because it's working. I don't know. And it felt like you tried too often. Like even the 3rd and goal at the 5 that Jalon throws the pick 6, I thought they should have ran the ball there. Because guess what? If you get stopped, kick a field goal to tie it. Or if you pick up 3-4 yards, go for it on 4th down. Or maybe you get the touchdown, right? Maybe they're expecting a pass. And there were moments that the only time that I actually wanted them to throw the ball was on like the 3rd and 13. And of course, that time they ran the ball. So it's just like the play calling I did not think was very good in this game for KU. Defensively, like I said, I thought the play calling was okay. Although I do have a qualm with any time an opponent tries like a fake QB draw pass. That worked for 2 touchdowns for Utah in this game that were wide open. That worked for a couple touchdowns against Iowa State. So clearly KU was very bad against those plays. So I guess the biggest positive here, though, is this. Like, if we are going to finish with a little positive here, because the fact that they lost, that is the biggest negative. That is the be-all, end-all. That is the headline here, right? They lost, no bowl game, 2nd straight year missing a bowl game, no extra practices for what's going to be a young team next year, stains Jalon Daniels' legacy. But I guess the positive is this. I feel better about quarterback position next year. Isaiah Marshall came in, played well in the moments that he was in the game. I know none of them were passing moments, which is what you really want to see, but 5 carries for 36 yards. And I'm just sitting here going like this. If Kansas would have ran the ball literally every play, if they would have run triple option, if they would have run the Navy offense, they win this game. I think they win this game by 2 scores, if I'm being completely honest. But I do think they win this game. And so from that standpoint, maybe I feel a little bit better because I love Isaiah Marshall's running. And in fact, like we're going to get into some next year conversation here. I would almost like, I know there's probably a good chance that Cole Ballard ends up being the starter. I would love to see Isaiah Marshall be the starter. I would love to see them invest maybe a little less money in the transfer portal receivers, which are probably going to be more expensive anyway, and beef up instead on the offensive line, tight end, and running back, and just be like, we're going to try to make this our identity. Our identity is going to be running the football. And you would hope that at least gets you back to bowl eligibility. But Jalon struggled so much today, and I think struggled in big moments and games throughout his career, that maybe whoever's quarterback for KU next year, whether it is Cole Ballard or Isaiah Marshall or David McComb or a transfer, maybe at the end of the day, even if the raw stats aren't as good, if you got more dog in you, right? If you got more of that chutzpah, if you got a little bit more of that in the key moments in the key games, then that's going to matter more for KU in the end, because they're constantly in close games. And that is what ends up mattering more for KU in the end. So I do feel better about the quarterback situation next year, because even if it doesn't reach the raw stats of this year, I think you could end up with just as impactful of a position moving forward. So bottom line here, you lost. You had multiple chances to get bowl eligible this year and last year. You couldn't do it. It's a failed season. It's a failed past 2 years for this team and this program. And 2026 is now a make or break year. And it comes after back-to-back seasons where 30 plus seniors departed both seasons. So it's going to be a young team. Good luck. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get podcasts. And we're brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Holidays are always feeling a little bit easier when you already know the perfect gift. And Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to the door. And this week, it's the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. The quality is exactly what you hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking easier. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See terms and site for details. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks. All right, instead of doing, game awards and stuff like that, like, I don't know, do we want to get into a game that, again, it felt like KU should have won? They out-yarded them by 60 yards, but they had all those turnovers. We talked about coming in the game. We said KU would need to be +2 in turnovers to win the game. I think it turns out if KU was just even in turnovers, they would have won the game. Heck, if KU was -1, they might have won the game. So we don't really need to get into that here. So let's take a look at the 2026 roster, the big off seasons, and kind of a season recap here. I would say this, as far as the season goes, this was clearly a failed year for Kansas and for the second straight year, right? I think if we're to evaluate where this program is at under Lance Leipold, it's interesting because if you said, I don't know, let's try to take the approach from like back in 2021 when he was hired or before he was hired. If you would have said through 5 seasons, you would get 4 seasons of 5 or more wins, you would get 2 bowl games and a bowl win and a ceiling of 9 wins. Maybe you would have been okay with that when he was hired in 2021. I don't know. I guess my thought all the way through was maybe 2021 would be a building year. Maybe 2022 would have been like a 4 or 5 win season. And then 23, you'd hope to be bowl eligible. And then you'd hope to be bowl eligible 3 straight seasons. So it's not that far off the trajectory or target goal. But based on what actually happened here, it feels worse because once you did get to bowl eligibility in 22 and then win 9 games in 23, it kind of resets the ceiling or the expected success for KU. I think we were looking at like individual seasons. I would give 2021 like maybe a B. I mean, it's still just 2 wins, but also given where he was at, and it was kind of year 0. I don't know, maybe we should give A against the curve because that was kind of, especially with how it finished and stuff. But 2022, I would give an A-. You finally made it back to a bowl game. You hosted College Game Day. Sure, you would have liked to not lose, 7 of the final 8, but it was objectively a fun year. So you're looking at maybe a B in 2021, maybe an A- in 2022. I think 2023, you could argue an A. I would still give an A- just from a standpoint of 9 wins, but it felt like there was more meat left on the bone that you easily could have won 10, maybe even 11 games that year. Specifically, you think of the K-State game, right? But A-, you beat OU, you won a bowl game, you won 9 games, right? And now 2024, I don't know. Do you give it a failing mark? I still feel like there were some fun moments that season from the standpoint of like beating 3 straight ranked opponents. So maybe I give it a C minus, barely passing. And then this year I would give it D plus. It's not a passing grade. It wasn't all failures, but overall it wasn't good enough. So I do think overall, if you would have said again when Lance Leipold was hired, like you'd have 2 bowl games in 5 seasons, I don't know. I feel like that would have been about on par. Again, would you have expected 3 in 5 seasons? Would you have expected 2? I think it's right kind of around there for what it's worth, especially when you hadn't won 4 more games coming into this since Mangino, and you've now at least done that in 4 straight seasons. But it does feel like the tides are changing with the investment into the program monetarily, with where we're at with the transfer portal. It's harder to stay bad for as long from a standpoint of like you have an opportunity to retool the roster every year. I guess point being, right? Now that said, KU had 33 seniors celebrate today. Means a lot of holes to fill. So let's get into next year's roster and what some of the biggest offseason storylines are for KU. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride a hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to make that fourth quarter comeback. Plus, you can even combine the live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. You can get futures on KU to win the Big 12 or make the Final Four, win the national championship. I don't know. Is it possible for the Darren Peterson can still win Player of the Year with all the games he's missed? You can get better odds on it right now over at FanDuel. So head over to FanDuel.com, sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. All right, let's look ahead to 2026. So let's start here. What does the returning roster potentially look like? Obviously, there are going to be players transferring away from KU. So that's going to change what this roster possibly looks like for KU. But on paper, the quarterback position is going to be kind of the biggest storyline if we're to kind of link those 2 pieces of this together. What is KU going to do at quarterback? Are they going to add a transfer portal quarterback? Is it only going to be based on if the right situation rises? Or are they just going to be set in stone firm about, hey, we want to let these guys compete? And then maybe if things aren't going well at the end of spring, we'll add a late addition. I don't know that works well at quarterback because you want them to learn the playbook, but I do feel like I lean toward that. Like, I don't know if you think the future of Marshall and McComb are going to be really good, or Ballard because you could potentially get 2 years out of him, then you don't add someone because it could be maybe it's slightly better for the short term, but it could hurt you in the long term. Then again, now that we view 2026 as a make or break year for this program and Lance Leipold, do they view it as we have to go all out on this year? And then maybe they do look at the transfer portal. The problem, though, is it is expensive to get a good transfer portal quarterback. So are you going to be better off with, taking a risk on a decent transfer portal quarterback who costs a lot of money? Or could you get like an offensive and defensive starter for that same amount of money and say, we're just going to try to be better around the quarterback? I would lean that way personally. I hope it's Marshall starting. I'd be fine with McComb as well. Not to put anything against Cole Ballard. I like Cole Ballard. I would love Cole Ballard as your backup for a couple of years. And I do appreciate the grit and consistency that he shows. I just love Isaiah Marshall's running ability. And like I said earlier, if you want to put less money into the receiver position and say, hey, we just want guys who maybe they're looking for a little bit bigger payday or play at a power university, but they're going to be gritty. They're going to be good blockers, and we don't need to pay top dollar for receivers, and we can spend more money at, whatever. Maybe it's getting one tight end. Maybe it's getting one stud running back. Maybe it's getting an extra offensive lineman starter. I would prefer to do that and make KU's, I don't know, their identity running the football and lean into Matt Lubick's option knowledge and stuff and be more of an option team and be more of a running team this year with Isaiah Marshall. I think there's success there. Like, can that at least get you back to 6 or 7 wins, which I think is going to be the goal next year? If you can win 6 games next year, I think that's a success for KU, right? So that'll be interesting. And then at running back, like Harry Stewart, Johnny Thompson, we saw them briefly this year. Justin Thurman, John Kelly, a little bit at the end. I think it would behoove Kansas to get a explosive running back to pair with whoever wins out among those young running backs. Kind of in the same way you have Highshaw and Williams as kind of 1A, 1B, or you had Neal and Highshaw. Go get a transfer portal back that's explosive. Maybe spend a little more money on that and a little less at receiver. You're looking at the receiver position. I think Kubeka and Pickett are looking at being the guys? And then do you add some more transfer portal additions? You got a lot of freshmen on this year's roster. Could they step into bigger roles? I'm going to be keeping an eye on Jaden Doss, the kind of late transfer ad you had from Nebraska, who I think has some skill. Tight end is going to be interesting. Leighton Cure, maybe he'll be back for an extra year. Carson Brune, I think, coming off the injury at the end of this year, showed a lot of good things as a redshirt freshman. He could be really good as a redshirt sophomore. I think it would certainly behoove you to add another tight end role, somebody who can be in kind of your top 2 or top 3 of the rotation, because you're going to be losing some other players. The offensive line will be interesting because Foster and Kobe Baines are both gone, but Tavaki Tuiko-Lovato, I think, showed well in kind of relief role. So I feel good about him winning one of the guard spots. Amir Herring actually had a really good season for KU, so I feel good about that. Tackle spot, Clemens was kind of up and down, but he played better over the back half than he did in the first half. So I think you feel better about where that's at next year. Adding maybe another transfer portal addition at one of the tackle spots, I think is going to be key. And then what do you do at center? Is Tyler Mercer done enough in practice to get there, or do you add a transfer there? Offensive line will be very interesting for KU. You look at the defense side of the ball, I think the 2 most important players for KU to make sure, you're spending extra dollar or whatever via your NIL, via your rev share to make sure they come back, are both on the defensive end. I think one is Leroy Harris III. I think the other is Trey Lathan. So Harris can come back. Here's the other thing. Harris can come back. He'll be a junior. And he was great this year. He was really good, actually, in the Utah game as well. You need to get him back as defense end, right? If you can have him and Dak Brinkley as your defensive ends, maybe you need, I don't know if Alex Bray as a senior will be your starter on the strong side, or you add someone. But I feel solid about the defensive end rotation, right? And then I would say Blake Harold would probably be up there too. Marcus Calvin, for guys you want to prioritize the most. I mean, again, the defensive tackles, like if you have Harold and Calvin, it's not a lot of guys on scholarship. Harold, Calvin, potentially could have Gage Keys back, Josiah Hammond, Cheese Hammond. It's maybe not as deep or many bodies as you have right now, but you could add some in the transfer portal. I feel better. I feel like it's going to be actually a higher ceiling from the starter of the defensive tackles if you can get those guys back. So if you can bring back those guys, I think the defensive line could be slightly even better than it was this season. And again, linebacker with Sip kind of preserving his red shirt, with John Kamara getting another year of kind of experience under his belt. We saw Ty Curvy on special teams make a big play against Utah, and he's a former highly talented player. If you can get Trey Lathan back, who I think is a really good player for KU linebacker, he was actually better than Bengali Kamara, then I think you could be actually okay in the front 7 next year. Who's going to be calling the plays on the defense? That's a question. But then I posed this as well on Locked On Jayhawks on the Twitter page. Theoretically, would you rather spend $1 million buying out DK McDonald, or would you rather spend $1 million in like rev share, I guess, I don't know, NIL, whatever, to get you could probably get 2 defensive starters for that money. I don't know, man. I don't know. With the way that it looked against Utah, maybe you are better. Maybe you are better getting 2 extra defensive starters, right? You can add 1 more good defensive lineman, and then you can add 1 DB to the mix. Would that be better, or would you be better off with a little less talent, but the potential of hiring a new coach? But you don't know. Is the new coach going to come in and struggle, or is the new coach going to be, a breath of fresh air? So that'd be kind of interesting. And then the secondary, I would say Jalen Todd would also be high up on the list of make sure you're retaining this guy. I know he was out in the Utah game, but he's been really good for KU, whether you've put him on the outside, whether you've put him in the slot. I know the KU DBs struggled this year and were inconsistent. There were some good games, but for the most part, it was a struggle. Todd was not one of the reasons why. He was really good this year, so he'll be a junior. The hope is that some of the guys who struggled, like you think of Austin Alexander, Saeed Gibbs, Jaleel Hurley, again, there were moments for any of those guys, right? But the hope is that this year of reps and experience will lead to them having better future years. And that, when you look at the potential returning talent, right, you could have, theoretically, if you get everybody back, which I don't know that I'm expecting because it's just today's day and age, but theoretically, if you brought back Leroy Harris, Blake Harold, Marcus Calvin, Trey Lathan, Joseph Sip, Dak Brinkley, Jalen Todd, Austin Alexander, Mason Ellis, Lyric Rawls, and Taylor Davis, that could be your starting 11 on defense. And those are all guys who played a relatively big role on this team, or if you want to say Alex Bray or whatever. So that actually gives me hope that maybe finally the defense can have a top 50 year, and then can you muster up enough running the football offensively? That's what I'm saying. If the defense can take a step forward, which I think it can, if you return those players, that's obviously a big if, and you could be a run identity team on the offense. Is that good enough to win 6 or 7 games? I think it could be, but you're going to need some improvements from certain guys. So overall, I would say this, do everything in your power. You need to make sure you get back. I would say, I don't know. Can you get Amir Herring back, right, on the offensive line? He had a really good year. Leroy Harris, Trey Lathan, Jalen Todd. Lyric Rawls, had some moments this season where he struggled in pass coverage, but overall he had a really good year and had some big hits. Like, those are the guys I'm kind of looking at. Like, make sure you bring back. And then you're going to need some player development. And I will say, like, that is kind of a big question right now. What is the player development for KU? I think KU's done a good job developing players on the defensive line. I think the offensive line it was really good under Scott Fuchs. It's been more hit or miss with Agpalsa so far at offensive line. Like, there's been some guys like Amir Herring has developed, Kobe Baines has developed, right? There's been other guys where maybe it hasn't developed as quickly or as much as you'd hoped. I would say the other positions are kind of a remain to be seen and a question mark right now. And that's going to be kind of the question coming into 2026. So at the end of the day, we'll have plenty more offseason content. I was hoping they were going to squeak this one out, hoping we were going to get some bowl content, but for the second straight year, that ain't happening. So certainly if we were measuring things on the Melvin Council dog scale, where Melvin Council is the dog, I know Melvin Council's at the top, he a dog. The rest of the guys, I guess certainly some of the things today, like I'd put Daniel Highshaw high up on the dog list for this KU football team. I put some of these guys high up. I put Leroy Harris, Trey Lathan high up on the dog list. But I guess too many poodles in the end for KU football. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. If you want to cheer up, go rewatch the KU postcast from the third place game of the Players era beating Tennessee, because I don't know, rewatch all Marco Jackson highlights all week long. All right, see you next time on LOJ.